I will never forget that hug, because she knew everything. Have you ever felt the weight of a secret so great it seemed impossible to forgive? Imagine carrying on your shoulders not only the scars of war, but also the memory of decisions that changed lives forever. Every step off the battlefield seemed harder than marching under fire. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear may surprise you, and perhaps even make you look at your own life differently. When I returned home, the world seemed the same. The streets, the houses, even the smell of morning. But inside me, everything was different. The roar of cars reminded me of gunfire. The sound of a door slamming made me feel the roar of explosions again. It wasn't just the war outside that had ended. It was the war inside me that continued. I felt like a prisoner of my own memories, and no matter how much everyone around me told me, "You're safe now," my heart didn't believe it. Have you ever been there? Of being in the right place but feeling like your soul was left behind? I avoided contact, avoided gazes. Every familiar face seemed to silently ask me what I had done, and I had no answers. Silence was my shield, but it was also my prison, until the day I saw her. She stood there, still, as if she knew exactly that this would be our moment. My heart raced. I wanted to run away, because she knew. She knew everything. What I had done, what I had seen, what I carry to this day. But my feet wouldn't move. The air felt heavier, every second a judgment. And then it happened. She opened her arms and, without saying a word, hugged me. It wasn't just any hug. It was as if she'd seen beyond my scars, beyond my shame. I broke down. My body trembled. The tears I'd been hiding for months came flooding back. In that moment, something inside me began to shift. What did that hug mean? Why would someone who knows everything you've ever done still choose to embrace you? Perhaps you felt this kind of hug too. The one that doesn't ask for explanations, that doesn't bring judgment, but simply says, "I'm still here." If you haven't, perhaps now is the time to consider the power a simple gesture can have. And this is where the story truly begins. Because that hug wasn't the end of my pain. It was just the first step in a journey I never imagined I would experience. A journey that would teach me about forgiveness, liberation, and new beginnings. But before I talk about that, you need to understand what happened to me before that day, to truly feel the weight of that moment. Get ready, because what comes next may shake you in ways you might not expect. And you know what's most impressive? To this day I remember the feeling of that hug as if time had stopped and everything around me had gone silent. It's impossible not to be moved when remembering. And I really want to know, if this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far. Maybe you've experienced something similar, or perhaps you know someone who also carries invisible scars. Sharing your experience can inspire others who need to hear it today. When you comment, you're not just responding to me. You're helping to create a space of support and acceptance here on the channel. This is how we build a community of people who believe that love and forgiveness can transform even the most painful stories. And if this story has touched you in any way, take the opportunity to like this video now. It's a simple gesture, but it goes a long way in helping this message reach more people who need to hear it. And if you enjoy this kind of content, subscribe to the channel. That way you can continue walking with me through these stories that make us reflect, feel, and often find hope. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share next will show you even more about what happened after that hug, and it could be the beginning of something powerful for you too. When I close my eyes, I can still feel the weight of the vest, the smell of dust clinging to my skin, and the distant sound of sirens. It's strange to think that for those on the outside, the war ends the day the soldier returns home. But for those who were there, the war continues. It hides in the details of everyday life, in the noises no one notices, in the shadows that appear at night when everything is silent. I'm not the same person who left, and that's something difficult to explain to anyone. The medals I brought in my suitcase seem to tell a story of victory, but only I know that each one carries a piece of pain, of loss, of decisions that changed everything. Returning was like falling into another battlefield, only an invisible one. I looked around and saw people's smiles, the routine I followed, and I felt like a stranger in my own home. No one knew what I had seen. No one had heard the screams echoing in my head. No one carried the weight of my choices. And it was this weight that followed me, as if strapped to my back, constantly reminding me that I was no longer the boy who one day left home full of plans. Guilt was a shadow that followed me. I wondered if I could have done something differently, if I could have saved someone, if my decision that day had truly been the only option. And the worst part is, these questions have no answers. They just repeat in my mind, like a broken record. and each repetition hurts more than the last. I found myself avoiding mirrors because I didn't want to look into the eyes of someone who carried so many hidden truths. People talked about starting over, about hope, about transformation. But how can you start over if your mind insists on returning to the same place? It was like I was trapped in a maze with no way out. Some call it PTSD, others call it trauma, but for me, it was simply a prison without bars. I could smile for a photo, I could go to a family gathering, but inside it felt like I was still there, lying on the cold floor waiting for the next shot. And it's at this point that something starts to change, because when you carry such great pain for so long, it either destroys you or forces you to see the world differently. It was in this state of profound exhaustion that I began to realize I needed help. It wasn't about being strong or appearing invincible anymore. It was about surviving what I had become. War taught me to make quick decisions, but this decision was different. I had to choose to truly live or simply exist. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happens inside someone who has been through war is much more complex than just bad memories. It's a change in mindset that affects everything: the way we see the world, trust people, even believe in our own future. I began to realize that it wasn't just the pain that haunted me, but also a strange search for meaning. It was as if each day was a chance to discover why I was still here. This is the kind of revelation no one tells you behind the scenes. No one talks about the impact of waking up in the middle of the night, sweating, hearing gunshots that aren't there. No one talks about how you start to avoid crowded places because every noise seems like a warning of danger. And no one talks about the loneliness of not being able to explain this to the ones you love. But little by little, I began to see that these invisible scars could also be a bridge, not to forget what happened, but to give new meaning to what remains. It was during this process that I began revisiting each memory, as if rewinding an old tape. And yes, it hurt, but it was necessary. It was the only way to keep these memories from defining me forever. And somehow this pain began to transform into something else. I realized there was a strength within me I'd never realized. A strength born not of war, but of the decision to move forward despite all the scars it left. If you've been following this far, write in the comments, "I understand this weight." I want to know how many people have felt this kind of struggle inside, because this story is just beginning, and what comes next may reveal something that will touch you even more deeply. When I returned home, it felt like time had moved on without me. The streets were the same, the neighbors continued their routines, the children played as usual, and the sun rose at the same time. But something inside me felt out of place, as if I were a visitor in a place that no longer belonged to me. It's hard to explain the feeling of being surrounded by normalcy when inside you carry chaos. It was as if there were an invisible barrier between me and the rest of the world, a glass wall that allowed me to see everything but prevented me from truly feeling it. I was there, but I wasn't. It was a spectator of my own life. The silence in the house was deafening. Each tick of the clock echoed like a gunshot. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made my entire body stiffen. I knew I was safe. I knew I was back. But my mind insisted that any sound could be a warning. This is the part no one sees behind the scenes of a soldier's life. You can walk through your front door, but the war walks through with you. It hides in the most ordinary corners, in the sound of a pot banging in the kitchen, the burst of a tire in the street, even the sound of the wind rattling the window. People smiled at me and said, "I'm glad you're back." I smiled back because it was expected, but something inside me screamed that I hadn't really returned. I felt trapped between two worlds, the world of those who never saw what I saw, and the world of those who can no longer forget. It was like being surrounded by a film that never stops playing, replaying every scene, every decision, every moment when everything could have been different. At night, when everything was quiet, it was even harder. The silence that should have brought peace became a stage for sounds only I could hear. I remembered the faces of my companions, those who returned and those who didn't. And along with these memories came a burning question in my chest. Why me? Why did I return and others didn't? This is a hidden truth no one likes to talk about. Survivor's guilt is something no one understands until they feel it. It's a weight you can't share out loud because it feels like you're complaining about being alive. This feeling kept me away from the people I loved most. It wasn't because I didn't want to be around them, but because I was afraid to show what was inside me. Afraid that if someone looked into my eyes for too long, they'd discover everything I'd done and seen. I became a master of emotional disguises, of automatic smiles, of short conversations that revealed nothing. Inside, I was begging for someone to notice, but at the same time, I was terrified that anyone would actually notice. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this silence wasn't just a lack of words, it was a muffled cry begging to be heard. It was a daily battle between the desire to move forward and the fear of facing what was inside. It's at this point that the journey begins to transform, because the emptiness becomes unbearable and you're forced to make decisions. Either you continue hiding behind a facade of normalcy, or you begin to look within and face every memory, every pain, every revelation that was buried. It's a painful but necessary process, because only then can the impact of the war begin to be truly understood. And when this process begins, every little detail takes on new meaning. An old photo on the wall is no longer just a memory. It's an invitation to revisit who you were before. A simple conversation in the living room can turn into a trigger that brings unexpected tears. And even the simple act of sitting at the dinner table can be a conscious decision to try to live again, even if it still hurts inside. This period was the loneliest of my life, but also the most revealing. It's during this time that we discover what we're truly made of, because we can't hide from ourselves forever. Little by little, I realized that silence could also be an ally, a space to reorganize what was destroyed. But this was only the beginning of the transformation, because there was still something I needed to face, the encounter with someone who knew everything, and who would change the course of my story in ways I could never have imagined. If you felt this weight along with me, write in the comments. I've felt this silence. I want to know how many people know this feeling of being present, but feeling like their heart is still far away. There are things we carry inside that don't show up in any photo. I remember a specific day, one of those that seems frozen in time, and that sometimes comes back in my dreams as if it were happening all over again. It was hot, the air was heavy, and everything smelled of gunpowder. I was in the middle of a decision that needed to be made in seconds, and those seconds changed everything. It was then that my life split into before and after. I don't like to talk about it because it's as if each word is a key that unlocks a door I strive to keep closed. But the truth is, no matter how hard I try to push it to the back of my mind, that scene insists on returning. I remember the loud sound, the shouting voices, the smell of smoke that burned my eyes. And I remember the exact moment I pulled the trigger. My body acted on instinct, trained to survive, but my heart never forgot what came next. This is the part no one tells you. The war ends, but the mind keeps returning to the same place, searching for a way to change what cannot be changed. I find myself wondering what would have happened if I had waited a second longer, if I had chosen a different path, if I had trusted my intuition instead of fear. These thoughts are like ghosts. They appear out of nowhere, in the middle of a meal or while walking down the street, and suddenly it's as if I'm back in that day. My body reacts as if I'm there again. My heart races. My breath becomes shallow. My hands clench into fists. And it's at these times that guilt suffocates me. Because no matter what I do, no matter how many times I tell myself it was the right decision, I feel like I failed. I failed myself. I failed them. I failed the world. The hardest part is looking at the people around me and pretending everything is fine. They greet me, ask me how I am, and I respond with an automatic smile. But inside, the question that echoes is always the same. What if they knew? This is the hidden truth that haunts me. The fear of being seen for who I really am. That someone will find out what happened that day and see me differently. That's why I keep myself closed off. It's easier to keep people at a distance than to risk revealing too much. And at the same time, there's a huge desire to be forgiven. I don't know if by God, by the people left behind, or by myself, maybe by everyone. This is the biggest battle, accepting that the past cannot be changed, but that it's still possible to build something in the present. It's a delicate balance between remembering so as not to repeat the same mistakes and trying to forget so as to move forward. And each memory brings a mix of pain and learning, as if every detail of that scene were a reminder that I still have a choice. Let this guilt destroy me, or use this experience as strength to change my mindset and seek a new direction for my life. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because guilt has the power to shape everything. The way you walk, the way you speak, the way you look at people. It can make you withdrawn, bitter, unable to trust again, or it can be the turning point that awakens something new within you. I began to realize that guilt was like a shadow that would always be there, but that I could learn to walk with it without letting it paralyze me. This was the beginning of a silent transformation, a journey that was just beginning, and that would lead me to face situations I never imagined I had the courage to face. Write in the comments, I know what it's like to carry a weight. I want to know if you've also felt this mixture of pain and a search for redemption that seems to have no end. I still remember exactly the day everything changed. It was an ordinary morning with a clear sky, the kind of day when life seems to want to go on as if nothing had happened. I was walking down the street, head down, trying to keep my breathing under control, when I saw her. She was there, standing there, as if she knew I would pass that way. My heart raced instantly, and my first impulse was to turn around, disappear, hide from everything she represented, because I knew she knew. She knew the stories no one dared tell aloud, the decisions I made that still haunt me. It was as if she carried in her eyes all the truths I tried to bury. The ground seemed to grow heavier with each step. I wanted to run away, but something inside me compelled me to keep going. It was a mixture of fear, shame, and a strange need to face that moment. I felt exposed, as if I were naked in the middle of the street, without armor, without a shield, without the mask I'd worn to survive since I returned. Every second felt like an eternity. She said nothing, just looked at me in a way that completely disarmed me. It was a look that mixed pain, compassion, and a strength I didn't know anyone could still offer me. The scene around me faded. There was no more noise from cars, no more footsteps of people rushing past. It was as if the world had stopped for just that moment to exist. My body was ready to react, to run, to protect myself, but my soul wanted to stay, and that's where the conflict lies. My mind screamed at me to leave, to not allow anyone to cross that barrier I'd spent months building. But my heart begged me not to miss this chance to be truly seen. That's when she took a step forward. A single step that changed the air around me. I felt my eyes sting and swallowed hard to keep from crying right there in the middle of the street. As much as I wanted to appear strong in that moment, the entire facade I'd built crumbled. She knew I was broken, and yet she didn't look away. And that was what hit me most. There was no judgment. No accusation, just presence. It's hard to explain the power that exists in a simple encounter like this. It's not just about two people looking at each other. It's about everything that's unsaid but is there, suspended in the air. It's about the hidden truth that finally finds room to breathe. It's as if she were saying, without words, I know what you did, and yet I'm still here. It hit me in a way nothing else had since I returned. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I didn't have to fight what I was feeling. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened after that first contact was what truly began to transform my mindset. It was as if that moment were the beginning of a journey, a turning point I hadn't planned. I felt like I'd been given a second chance not to erase what happened, but to learn to live with it without letting it define me. This encounter was like a revelation, a vivid reminder that, even amidst the greatest shadows, there is still room for light. If you're feeling this weight with me, comment below. I felt this presence. I want to know if you've ever experienced a moment when someone truly saw you, and it changed everything inside you. As she took her second step toward me, I felt my chest tighten, as if something were about to break inside. It was as if every memory, every weight, every truth I'd carried up until that moment was being dragged to the surface. The air felt thicker, my breath shallower, and my hands began to sweat. I didn't know if I was ready for what was about to happen. Part of me wanted to resist, to maintain control, to remain the soldier who learned to swallow pain without letting it show. But the other part, the part tired of fighting everything, begged for relief, for a sign that there was still something inside me worth saving. It was then that she stepped closer and simply opened her arms. No words, no explanation, just that simple yet devastating gesture. I stood still for a moment, as if the whole world had stopped to give me the chance to decide. Continue carrying everything alone or allow myself to be embraced. And it was in that exact second that something inside me broke. I took a step forward and felt that embrace envelop me completely, as if it were the first time in years that someone had truly held me. The impact was immediate. I felt my legs weaken and had to lean on them to keep from falling. My whole body began to tremble, and what I'd been holding back for months finally found an outlet. The tears came hard, as if they'd been trapped all this time behind a dam that was now breaking. They weren't silent tears. They were deep, torn tears, the kind that come from the soul. And for the first time, I didn't fight it. Each sob seemed to lift a piece of the weight crushing me. I felt my heart race, then slow, as if finding a new rhythm. The warmth of her embrace reminded me that I was alive, that there was someone there anchoring me to the present, keeping me from getting lost in memories again. It was strange and liberating to feel like I didn't need to say anything, that this moment was enough. The voices in my head, the screams, the sounds of explosions faded away, as if someone had turned down the volume on a radio that never stopped playing. The feeling was like crossing an invisible border, emerging from a dark and silent place and seeing a little light again. That embrace didn't erase the past, but it showed me that perhaps it no longer needed to define me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because it's amazing how a simple gesture can cause such intense transformation. In that moment, I felt I had been given permission to feel again, to be human again. It was as if she had lifted my obligation to be strong all the time, and reminded me that vulnerability isn't weakness, but an essential step toward healing. That hug became a kind of milestone in my journey, a silent turning point that would change my mindset forever. If you're feeling the same way as me, write in the comments. I felt this relief. I want to know if you've also experienced a moment when someone gave you a simple gesture that completely changed the weight you were carrying. When the crying finally began to subside, I felt as if I'd just weathered a storm. My shoulders felt lighter, as if the pain I'd been carrying had, at least for a moment, found rest. Her embrace still enveloped me, and I realized I didn't need to explain anything. I didn't need to justify my decisions or recount the details of what had happened. She knew, and yet she was there, steady, holding me up when I no longer had the strength to stand. It was like a silent revelation. Maybe I didn't need to spend the rest of my life trying to make amends. Maybe there was, indeed, a way to move forward. That was the moment the word, forgiveness, began to make a different sense to me. I'd always thought forgiveness was something we asked someone for, hoping the other person would somehow release our guilt. But there, feeling that human warmth, I realized that the forgiveness I needed most was my own. I needed to forgive myself for not being able to save everyone, for not being perfect, for making snap decisions on a battlefield where perfection doesn't exist. That was the turning point that began to transform my mindset. Each tear that fell seemed to make room for something new to be born. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. Not the romantic hope that everything would suddenly be okay, but a realistic, down-to-earth hope that told me I could, indeed, start over, even with the scars. It was like discovering that my survival wasn't a punishment, but an opportunity, a chance to rebuild, to use what I'd experienced for something greater than my own pain. In the days that followed, that hug continued to resonate within me. It was as if it had been imprinted on my body, reminding me that I didn't have to face this journey alone. I began to realize that acceptance doesn't mean forgetting, but learning to live with the past without letting it define my future. This changed the way I saw the people around me. I began to listen more, to observe more, to realize that everyone carries invisible battles that no one sees. This awakened in me an empathy I had previously been unable to feel. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding forgiveness was only the first step. The real challenge was allowing this forgiveness to transform me from the inside out. I felt like I was rebuilding an inner space that had previously been in ruins, and little by little I discovered that there was room for love, yes. Love for myself, love for the people who were still by my side, love for the life I still had left to live. This was the liberation that began to break the invisible chains that held me captive. This process wasn't quick. Some days it felt like I'd made progress, and others like I'd come full circle. But even in these setbacks, something had already changed. I knew there was a way out, and that made all the difference. Because when the mind finds a possibility for healing, the body begins to respond, energy begins to return, and the will to live begins to grow. If you've ever felt something similar, write in the comments, "I want this fresh start." I want to know if you've also felt that, despite everything, there's still a chance to free yourself from what's holding you back. After that day, something inside me began to stir in a way I couldn't explain. It was as if the embrace had broken a dam, and little by little the waters were finding new paths to flow. I found myself wondering how many people around me might be experiencing something similar, carrying silent battles that no one sees. This reflection made me see the world differently. Suddenly, the quiet neighbor, the friend who always changes the subject when the conversation gets serious, even the stranger who crosses my path with a lost look, they could all be facing internal wars that no one imagines. It was as if a veil had fallen, and I could see beyond appearances, realizing that behind every face lies a story, and many of these stories are made of unspoken pain. I began to realize that this silence, which so often felt like an enemy, also had something to teach me. It showed me how important it is to have the courage to open up, to give space to emotions, and to accept that we can't always face everything alone. That hug showed me that needing someone wasn't weakness. On the contrary, recognizing this need was the first step toward becoming stronger. And it made me think about how many opportunities I'd missed to reach out to someone, how many times I'd seen someone's head down and chosen not to engage, afraid of seeming invasive or not knowing what to say. Today I understand that sometimes it's not about saying the right words, it's about being there. It's about presence, about showing that someone doesn't have to cross the desert alone. This realization brought me a kind of new responsibility. It was as if I had been called to be for others what she had been for me, not in a grandiose way, but through small gestures, the kind that seem too simple to make a difference but have a profound impact. A genuine smile, a listening ear, a pat on the shoulder. Small things that have the power to hold someone back from the brink. And I realized that this helped me too. Each time I offered this kind of gesture, it was as if a part of me was restored. I better understood what collective healing means. This idea that when we help someone carry their burden, we are also lightening our own. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic because this reflection goes beyond my own story. There's a hidden truth in all of this. We live surrounded by people who seem fine on the outside, but who are screaming inside. And often this screaming is silent, disguised as productivity, jokes, routine. Looking beyond these layers requires sensitivity, and this sensitivity begins when we allow ourselves to truly feel. When I began to open myself to what I felt, to my fears, to my memories, I also began to better perceive the signs in others. It's as if pain sharpens our senses. This journey of transformation isn't linear. Some days I felt inspired, almost ready to embrace the world. Other days it felt like I was back where I started, dealing with the same painful memories. But even on those most difficult days, something had already shifted. I knew there was a way out. I knew I could take a deep breath, remember that embrace, and find balance again. That memory became a kind of emotional anchor, something that kept me from losing myself completely. And perhaps that's what so many people need today. An anchor, something or someone to remind them that it's still possible to keep going. I thought a lot about the power of encounters. How many lives change because two people met at the right moment? How many stories could be different if someone had stopped for a moment to look into the eyes of someone who was suffering? This realization resonated with me profoundly because it made me understand that our journey isn't just about what we experience, but about what we leave in the lives of others. This silent impact we leave along the way is part of our own healing. Every time we offer support, we are writing a new chapter not only in the lives of those we receive, but also in our own. And it was this revelation that also began to transform my concept of strength. Before, I believed that being strong meant enduring everything in silence, maintaining composure and not showing weakness. Now I see that strength is having the courage to open up, to allow yourself to feel, to admit that you need help. Strength is having the courage to become vulnerable so that something new can emerge. This shift in mindset didn't happen all at once, but it was like a thread that began to unravel, pulling with me new truths, new perspectives, new meanings for what I experienced. This inner movement gradually gained momentum until it became a commitment. I wanted to be more present for the people I love. I wanted to listen more, judge less, and make myself available, not to solve anyone's problems, but to be that respite someone can find in the midst of chaos. Because I know firsthand what it means to receive this kind of support. I know how much it can prevent someone from giving up trying one more time. And every time this reflection comes to mind, I feel like this journey is far from over. Because there will always be someone in need of a gesture of presence, and there will always be something within us that can be healed when we decide to reach out. It's a never-ending cycle, but one that can transform the world around us if each of us decides to do our part. If this reflection also spoke to you, comment below. I want to be that presence. I want to know who is willing to become that embrace in the life of someone who needs it. Sometimes the greatest battlefield is within us, and no medal or uniform can prepare us for this silent confrontation. It took me a long time to understand that the war I was fighting now had no trenches, no visible enemies, no weapons. It was here inside, in the place where no one could see, in the space where memories turned to shadows, and where guilt whispered that I didn't deserve to move on. It took courage to stop running from myself and decide that I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to live. That was the turning point. Understanding that hope wasn't a distant idea, but a choice I could make every day even when everything felt too heavy. The first time I managed to step outside that cycle of pain was almost imperceptible. It was when I decided to open my bedroom window after days of being locked up, sit on the edge of my bed and just breathe. It seemed like a small thing, but it was in that moment that I realized something was changing. I began paying attention to the simple things, the sound of the wind blowing against the curtains, the smell of coffee coming from the kitchen, the sound of children playing in the street. These sounds became signs that life was still happening outside, and that perhaps it was time for me to participate in it again. I learned that starting over isn't a single event, but a series of small, daily decisions. It's when you decide to talk about what you feel instead of bottling it all up. It's when you allow yourself to laugh again, even if the pain is still there. It's when you look in the mirror and begin to see not just the battle-scarred soldier, but the person who is still alive, capable of building something new. And each time I did this, I felt like I was recovering a piece of myself that had been lost along the way. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because hope, contrary to what many people think, isn't a feeling that emerges out of nowhere. It's an act of resistance. It's about keeping going even when there are no guarantees. It's about believing that scars aren't an endpoint, but a reminder that you've been through the worst and are still here. This shift in mindset was liberating for me. I stopped trying to erase the past and started learning from it. Each difficult memory became a kind of map, showing where the wounds were that needed healing and which parts of me still needed care. This process led me on a journey of self-discovery I never imagined I'd experience. I began writing, and it was through writing that I found a way to organize the chaos within me. Each word on paper felt like a weight lifted from my shoulders. I also began talking to people who had experienced similar stories. At first, I thought it would just be a distraction, but I soon realized that it was one of the greatest paths to healing. Listening to others and realizing I wasn't alone, discovering that someone understood what I felt without needing too many explanations, gave me a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in a long time. And that's what makes me believe there's always a chance to start over, because even when I thought I'd lost everything, I found something new to build. And that new something was stronger, truer, more conscious. Not because the pain disappeared, but because I learned to live with it without letting it paralyze me. Each scar became a reminder that I survived. And if I survived, it's because I still have something to do, something to give, something to live. I began to see purpose in the simplest things. A conversation with a stranger in the grocery line, a smile exchanged on the street, a sunset that seemed to tell me I was still part of something bigger. These small signs showed me that life was inviting me to participate again, that I didn't need to continue isolating myself in my own suffering. This realization was one of the most important revelations of my journey, understanding that I didn't need to wait until I was completely healed to start living. I could live in the midst of the process. I could grow while I was still rebuilding myself. This is the power of hope. It doesn't erase the darkness, but it lights a small light that helps us carry on. And each step we take toward that light strengthens us, until one day we look back and realize how far we've come. The journey continues. The challenges still exist, but now we also have the certainty that they aren't the end of the line. They're just part of the journey. If this message spoke to you in any way, comment below. I chose to believe. I want to know who else decided to turn on this little light and take at least one step towards a new beginning. It's incredible how telling this story out loud still moves me. Every detail brings back feelings I thought I'd left behind, but at the same time it brings me certainty. This story needs to be told, because it's not just about me. It's about everyone who has ever felt alone in the midst of their own inner struggle, about those who carry hidden guilt, about those who hide tears behind automatic smiles. And that's why this video exists, to remind me that even at the bottom of the pit, there can be a glimmer of light waiting to be noticed. If you've made it this far, it's because this topic somehow touched something deep inside you too. Perhaps it awakened a memory, a longing, or perhaps a burden you still carry. And that's why I want to invite you to join me in this conversation. Write in the comments what went through your mind while listening to this story, what touched you most, or simply if you've ever experienced something similar. It can be a simple sentence, but one that represents how you felt. This space was created for us to share experiences, support each other, and show that we don't have to go through these journeys alone. Your voice here matters. When you comment, you bring this message to life and help create a safe space for others who may be experiencing the same thing, but haven't yet found the courage to speak up. Each shared story is like a piece of healing that spreads to someone who may desperately need to read it. And if this content resonated with you, if it sparked reflection or gave you the strength to keep going, please leave a like. This simple gesture helps this video reach others who may be at their limit today and need to hear this exact message. It also shows me that this is the kind of content you want to see more often, and it gives me the strength to continue bringing these reflections to you. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the impact of a loving gesture is greater than we imagine. It can heal old wounds, restore trust, and restore hope. It can be the difference between someone giving up or believing again. That's the beauty of stories like this. They're not just meant to move, they're an invitation to action. Comment below. I believe in the power of love. I want to see who's willing to be that transformative presence in the life of someone in need. If you've made it this far, thank you for joining me on this profound journey. This video was made to remind us that even after the most difficult battles, there's always a way to start over. If this message touched you in any way, please leave a like. It's the simplest way to show that this conversation resonated and to help me continue bringing you stories like this. Also, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel because we still have many reflections to share together, and I want you to be a part of each one. And tell me in the comments that you stayed until the end. Write, "This story found me, so I know who walked with me this far." And since you've made it this far, don't stop now. There's a video right here that complements everything we discussed today. Click and stay with me there because this journey is just beginning.